Hello everyone. Our today's topic is peasants and farmers. First of all, we know the time of open fields and commons. Before late 18th and early 19th centuries, in large parts of England, the countryside was open. It was not partitioned into enclosed lands privately owned by landlords. Peasants cultivated on strips of land around the village they lived in. Usually, these strips were very varying quality and often located in different places to ensure that everyone had a mix of good and bad land. For the poor, the common land was essential for survival. It supplemented their meager income, sustained their cattle, and helped them tide over bad times when crops failed. From about the 16th century, when the price of wool went up in the world market, rich farmers wanted to expand wool production to earn profits. They were eager to improve their sheep breeds and keen on controlling large areas of land in compact blocks to allow improved breeding. So they began dividing and enclosing common land and building hedges around their holdings to separate their property from that of others. They drove out villagers who had small cottages on the commons, and they prevented the poor from entering the enclosed fields. New demands for grain. English population between 1750 and 1900 multiplied over 4 times. This meant an increased demand for food grains to feed the population. Moreover, Britain at this time was industrializing. More and more people began to live and work in urban areas. Men from rural areas migrated to towns in search of jobs and buy food grain from the markets to survive. When demand increased rapidly, food grain prices rose. French England War by the end of 18th century so the prices of food grains in England was very high. The Age of Enclosure. In the 19th century, grain production grew as quickly as population. This increase in food grain production was made possible by bringing new lands under cultivation. Importance of turnip and clover for farmers. In about 1660s, the farmers in many parts of England began growing turnip and clover. These crops improved the soil and made it more fertile. Enclosures were now seen as necessary to make long term investments on land and plan crop rotations. To improve the soil, enclosures also allowed the richer landlords to expand the land under their control and produce more for the market. The condition of poor. When fences came up, the enclosed land became the exclusive property of one landowner. The poor could no longer collect their firewood from the forest or graze their cattle on the commons. They could no longer collect apples and berries or hunt small animals for meal. Everything had price which poor could not afford to pay. In places where enclosures happened, the poor were displaced from the land. They moved to the southern countries of England for secure jobs. For a very large part of the year, the poor had no work. At the same time, the threshing machine was introduced. So, the introduction of threshing machine. During Napoleonic Wars, prices of food grains were high and farmers expanded production vigorously. Fearing a shortage of labor, they began buying the new threshing machines that had come into the market. After the wars, thousands of soldiers returned to villages. They needed jobs to survive. Bread, basket, and dust bowl. At the end of 18th century, settled agriculture had not developed on any extensive scale in the USA. Till the 1780s, white American settlements were confined to a small narrow strip of coastal land in the east. Native American groups in the country were nomadic, some were settled. By the early 20th century, white Americans had moved westward and established control up to the west coast, displacing local tribes and carving out the entire landscape into different agricultural belts. The USA had come to dominate the world market in agricultural produce. We will conclude our lecture in the next part of this chapter.